the weekly program focusing on all things African sport, both from the continent and beyond. It's great to have you joining us once again. I'm Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up on the show, the chase for bragging rights is underway in the final of the Africa Women's Cup of Nations in Accra. And in Zimbabwe, a dark cloud still hangs over the country's football reputation 8 years later. Welcome to the program. Now, the search for a new host for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations has begun after the Confederation of African Football stripped Cameroon of the hosting rights. The decision was arrived at during a CAF Executive Committee meeting in the Ghanaian capital. This is due to serious delays with its preparations and in the midst of a violent separatist rebellion near 2 of the planned venues. CAF President Ahmad has announced that a new bidding process is to be opened. Countries now have until the end of December to submit bids. The 24-team tournament starts in 7 months.
In light of all the reports which we have received and also having analysed the evolution of events, we have taken the decision to take the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations away from Cameroon. But against that, the CAF makes a commitment to support Cameroon, to give time to Cameroon so that it can prepare well for another Africa Cup of Nations in the future. Obviously, there are immediate consequences.
Right now, for joining us now for more on the situation coming out of Accra to discuss this in Cairo is Inaz Mazar, an Egyptian football analyst and deputy editor-in-chief of the Al Ahram Weekly. Also joining us from Accra, Ghana is CGTN's Sadiq Shaban. Inaz, let me start with you. What exactly was the extent of the delay in preparations by Cameroon according to the technical committee's report?
Well, according also to CAF statements, the delay is for them is big. I mean, it's not enough for them, for Cameroon to host the Africa Cup of Nations. They find that, or they believe that there is a gap between the preparations they have done so far and the build-up process to host the competition and the realities on the ground. Consider something. I mean, when we talk about the Africa Cup of Nations, it's not only the stadiums we are talking about and the venues that will host it, but only other aspects as well, like the hotels, the training pitches, and so many things, location, roads, transportation, everything that affects the Africa Cup of Nations. And I believe that this is what CAF is looking for, and they believe that Cameroon will not be able or will not be ready to host the Africa Cup of Nations by June and July in 2019. For them, it is a great delay, and it will affect the competition, especially with the negative reports coming throughout the year since in 2018 that they are not going as well.
All right, Sadiq, coming to you now in Accra. You're on the ground there. What are the repercussions for Cameroon, and has there been a reaction from the authorities there?
Well, I've spoken to a number of Cameroonian journalists who are covering their team that's playing, just clinched a ticket to the World Cup, and they are saying CAF has ruined their moment. CAF ruined that semi-final yesterday between Cameroon and Mali by announcing or making that announcement, and they say, look, CAF could have sat a day after this tournament to make that decision, but when Cameroon was playing, Cameroon says making that decision at that time was tantamount to double punishment. Officials of the normalization committee of FECAFOOT, that is the Cameroon Football Federation, say they did speak to officials of the CAF, inspectors who are here. Government officials gave assurances that Cameroon will be ready, and they contend that Cameroon has had to make a lot of adjustments really to meet what CAF has demanded, from 16 teams to 24 teams, building new stadia and renovating many others. And they feel it's a little bit unfair for CAF to take this decision at this point. But insiders within CAF say the experience of Gabon in the last edition has stopped them not to take this kind of guarantees lightly after the embarrassment that they saw in Gabon, where Gabon was hardly ready. Preparations were going in very late into the tournament, and CAF did not want a repeat out of this.
All right, unfortunately, we'll have to break that off right now as we take you to breaking news now from Buenos Aires, Argentina, for the latest on what the G20 leaders have been deliberating. The meeting of leaders is now in its second day. Let's now listen in.
Tratamos de buscar cosas que nos sumen a ambos y lo estamos logrando. La verdad que hemos acordado muchísimo.
That's precisely what we're achieving. We've agreed on a whole lot of things over the past few hours and during the 17 bilaterals we had, and I'm sure we'll address that in some of the coming questions.
Ian Okada will ask a question from Ahashingud. Good afternoon. I think there have been several difficulties regarding the various interests of the 20 countries. But what has been the most difficult thing to be able to reach this statement, this agreement? And in which way did you solve it? And additionally, do you have any advice for Japan for next year? Thank you.
I told Shinzo Abe at the end that I wasn't just giving him the floor, but basically shopping the responsibility off to him. I chucked it to him as if it was a rugby ball. It's been a huge responsibility for us, and we are happy to have got to the end of it after this truly unprecedented task for our region, our country. And this goes to show then that when we get down to work, we Argentines can do real high-quality stuff. We can get things right, and we need to take pride in that, because it's a time at which we're changing history, and we think these things show that there's a future for us, and we undertake to work with this degree of professionalism, engaging in dialogue and with respect. And obviously, I don't need to offer recommendations to such a wise people as the Japanese people. We need to learn a lot from them. I always say they're more than welcome to work in Argentina, because every time you've come here, we've learned from you. So I don't think you really need any advice from me, or that Shinzo needs any advice to truly exercise the presidency of the G20 very well.
Next question, Emiliano Russo from Diario Popular. Mr. President, I would like to know why in the bilateral meeting with Theresa May you didn't mention, since it's a constitutional mandate, the Argentina's claim about the island's sovereignty, the Malvinas Island sovereignty. So in which way do you think these macro negotiations in the framework of the G20 and the success that you expressed, how they can impact our real economy in daily concerns such as inflation, which is going to be the highest one this year since 1991?
Yes, that was on the agenda. We all said that aside from the fact that each party ratifies its claims, the meeting would take place even in spite of the differences, and besides, the claim is enshrined in our constitution. But we are both really happy to have engaged in constructive dialogue. These are things that help us start resolving certain matters, such as connectivity for the islands. And we were also able to identify the remains of the war dead, which was something really moving and something that the families had been expecting for a very long time. And I think that is what counts. We are not talking about leaving anything aside, but rather about the fact that based on a relationship, things will be resolved. But we need to start walking on other paths and fields. We're working a lot with them on anti-corruption, for instance, which is a very important thing for our society. We need to finally get rid of the corruption that has damaged us so much. So we're working on many important fronts. And as to what concrete things, that's a good question. In these bilaterals, we have actually arranged financing on potable drinking water projects, wind power, gas, road infrastructure, logistics, and others for approximately $3 billion, which is quite a bit for us. Also improvements for our Belgrano freight railway, Roca Electrico line, also railway line. We have agreed on customs facilitation matters and matters relating to the prevention of customs offenses. It's very important to put an end to corruption in import-export procedures. We've also worked and continue to work on modernization of government, e-government, and transparency. And we actually are signing deals with several governments, with the Turkish government, and we're always trying to improve the sanitary and phytosanitary processes in order to facilitate trade. We discussed this with Prime Minister Narendra Modi this morning from India, and he invited us to visit India. We'll probably be there in February. India is another great opportunity for cooperation with Argentina. We're also working on satellite matters. We have also entered into fisheries and agriculture agreements to work on research. E-commerce has also been present at meetings with Macron, with Prime Minister Conte from Italy. We'll be having delegations of small and medium-sized enterprises to come and partner with our companies, and we think that's good because it paves the way to create jobs again, which is one of the key goals we have ahead of us. So you'll see we've made headway on a whole lot of matters, and we still have the meeting with Russia this evening and tomorrow with China. And at those meetings, we also hope
the Argentinian president there fielding questions on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Buenos Aires. Plenty to look forward to there, including a link-up meeting between Presidents Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. Well, let's take you back to the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations news. We still have Inaz Mazar and Sadiq Shaban standing by for us. Inaz, coming back to you, the process of selecting a new host has now begun just 7 months to the start of the tournament. Is this likely now to affect the finals?
Well, it seems it will actually, with considering that the draw will not be held before April, earlier in April or maybe in March. I mean, then the teams will have only a month or a month and a half to prepare and build up for the teams they are going to play against. I mean, it's you will know your opponents just 2 months or even 3 months before the competition. This is not enough time. And also, if you are going to when will CAF decide the hosting country. I mean, this also affects, because building up your preparations for playing in like Cameroon or a team, a country in the West, in the East, or in the South, or in North Africa. Until now, you don't know the country. You don't know even the countries who are going to submit their bids in order to host this situation. So I guess, and I believe it's going to affect not the finals itself, but the preparations and the build-up process of the teams for the finals. And I think the whole thing that happened and taking away it from Cameroon, the main reason was the increase of the number of teams into 24. I think if it were still 16 teams, maybe Cameroon would have been able to catch up and fulfill its responsibilities and whatever was asked for the organization.
All right, Inaz, thank you very much for those insights. Inaz Majar, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Al Ahram Weekly. Sadiq Shaban still standing by for us, and we'll come back to you in just a moment. Following the news, though, Cameroonians have been angered by the delayed preparations that led to the stripping of hosting rights. They now want authorities to complete the construction of infrastructure to enable a country to bid for future tournaments.
Maybe it's a good decision, because instead of organizing a discount AFCON, it's better to give it to someone who's ready, so Cameroon will have time to get ready and find the necessary means to think about organizing an AFCON worthy of their name.
We already knew what had to happen. There is no stadium, there is no road, there is nothing. A country that is at war. We want to organize the AFCON. How? Logically, we could not make it clear. Cameroon could not organize the Africa Cup of Nations. It's clear because there is no infrastructure. There is no stadium, no road, no hotel, and no hospitals.
President Ahmad is someone who is really strict about these decisions. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. From the beginning, I knew he was going to withdraw the AFCON. There was nothing there. So I'm really very proud that we withdrew the AFCON in Cameroon. It's really going to make the Yaoundé government rethink. They're going to really get to work. Then we can organize it.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the Confederation of African Football has opened up the bidding process to select a new host for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. The process is to be completed by the end of this month. CAF President Ahmad has been speaking on how the new host will be selected.
We will set up as soon as possible a committee with the task of choosing a country to organize the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. We know there will not be many candidates, but we will leave the work to this committee to assess, to make the visits to the candidates, and before the end of the year, we are aiming for the end of the year to decide on the host country for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. This is without interrupting the talks about the works which Cameroon will undertake on the preparation of an Africa Cup of Nations, similarly with Côte d'Ivoire. So that is the decision that we have taken.
Well, two North African countries are reportedly angling to take over the hosting rights for the event. Morocco and Egypt have been cited as countries with ready infrastructure should they get the nod. The Egyptian government has hinted more than once that Egypt is willing to host any CAF event at any time. For more on that, here is Adel Mahroui.
Right after CAF stripped off Cameroon from its hosting rights for the 2019 African Cup of Nations, members of the Egyptian Football Association started speaking up. Two elected board members say that the EFA will support Morocco's bid to host the continent's first 24 teams competition. One member, Khaled Latif, appeared confident that Morocco will win that bid, clarifying that talks have been already ongoing and that many African associations are already on board that North African bid. Previously, Hani Abu Reida, the EFA president, said he won't clash with Morocco for the 2019 African competition. Meanwhile, when the Cameroon hosting crisis began, the Egyptian sports minister repeatedly stressed that Egypt has the power to host the AFCON.
Egypt is very rich with its youth and sports facilities. We host numerous international sports events all year long. Egyptian sports associations are always keen to organize in the best technical, managerial and modern way. We will always welcome hosting any CAF event at any time. I stress again, at any time.
Although it may seem as a contradiction, there hasn't been any official announcement yet about whether Egypt will support Morocco or enter this fresh bid. Supporting Morocco could be part of a bigger deal. Cairo has been preparing to file for hosting the 2030 FIFA World Cup. Backing Morocco for next year's AFCON is maybe to make Africa united behind Egypt when it approaches FIFA for the World Cup. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, away from the Africa Cup of Nations next year to the women's version of the event that draws to a close later today. The final of the 2018 Africa Women's Cup of Nations is currently underway in the Ghanaian capital, Accra. 10-time champions Nigeria's Super Falcons and South Africa's Banyana are contesting the final right now as we speak. Let's go back to CGTN's Sadiq Shaban, who is in Accra, where the final is currently underway. Sadiq, what is the very latest from the Accra Stadium?
Well, the Accra Stadium is just behind me, Mahia, and in the last few minutes, this match has now proceeded to the extra time after both teams ended regulation time on equal terms, 0-0, but Nigeria having lost a penalty in the second half. So the match is currently underway in extra time, and it'd be interesting to see who walks away with this trophy. Already South Africa has met Nigeria in the group stage and won by a solitary goal. They are looking to seal what they call a double here in Ghana, having already secured their first ever World Cup qualification. South African team telling me earlier today that if they win the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, then it will just be an icing on the cake, as the bigger prize has already been claimed. For Nigeria, though, it will be a routine return to the World Cup. Africa's most successful team has been in the Women's World Cup since 1991. They'll be looking to retain their title and also match to the World Cup in France in 2019. But that will have to wait perhaps in the next few minutes, and then we'll see who will emerge the winner of the Women's Cup of Nations. Importantly, Maya, Cameroon has already clinched the third ticket from Africa to the World Cup. So we are waiting to see the winner of the Women's African Cup of Nations.
All right, Sadiq, thank you very much for keeping us updated. That match, as you heard there, 0-0. Sadiq Shaban joining us live there from Accra in Ghana. Well, as the nation hosts the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, many are hoping that the tournament will provide more opportunities for girls and women in the sport. Support for female footballers is rare in Ghana, partly due to the flawed perception that the sport is only for girls who don't do well at school. But one club is now determined to change that, as CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports.
Mardia Aminu's passion for football started when she was 10. She and these other girls come from impoverished communities in Accra, where women's football gets little support. 8 years later, she's the captain of the Nimobi Ladies Football Club.
At first, my mother didn't give me the support to play football. But as time goes on and with my brother's support, she agreed for me to play football.
It's rare for girls like Mardia to have their talent shaped from an early age, and many still battle social stigma.
When I was in JHS, some teachers were saying that when I played football, I can't give birth and then I'll become muscular.
Nimobi was formed in 2008 to promote gender equality in sports. It's funded by the club's managers with support from NGOs.
When we started training these girls, they didn't know how to play football, and people from their communities didn't support the idea. But after a few years, the girls' skills improved, and now people come to watch them play.
The club's manager says some parents don't let their daughters play football as they are worried they will abandon their studies.
We formed this club not only for the girls to play football, but also to empower them. We give them training so that they will be able to become responsible people in future.
With more clubs like this, Ghana's national women's team will certainly have an array of talented players to choose from.
Mardia and the other girls drawn from deprived communities in Accra hope one day to get a call-up to play for the women's national team. She says she will strive to overcome all obstacles that may come her way to achieve her goal. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And still to come. In Zimbabwe, a dark cloud still hangs over the country's football reputation 8 years later.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Finally, Zimbabwean football is still trying to shake off its association with match fixing more than 8 years after the damaging Asia Gate scandal involving more than 90 players and officials. CGTN's Farai Makutuya has more from Harare.
Zimbabwe's FA has adopted 3 R's to fight the cancerous vice which threatens football's sacrosanct values of respect and fair play.
Recognize that there's an attempt to fix the match. Resist that particular attempt and report to relevant authorities who will take appropriate action.
The strategy is underpinned by continuous education.
All our courses that we have done, all our capacity building programs, we have tried as much as possible to ensure that we educate to our officials the dangers of match fixing, how it destroys the valuable aspects in our game. We have also tried as much as possible to sanction officials who would have been implicated in match fixing. Around 2014, we even sanctioned some referees that had fixed the matches in Chegutu. They were sanctioned, given bans over 10 years.
Its efforts are paying off and grabbing headlines, this time for all the right reasons. Local referee Norman Matemera blew the whistle on an attempt to bribe him with $10,000 to influence a CAF Confederations match he took charge of in April. His stance won him praise at home and abroad.
By doing so, one becomes a role model, and those people who would want to be involved in match fixing in future would be scared away.
It also proved that the beautiful game is not beyond redemption. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And that's it for our football-packed show this week. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. Once again, thanks for watching. I'm Mutua from myself and everyone here. We leave you with our move of the week, where Lewis Hamilton wrapped up the Formula 1 season in style with victory at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix last week.
Yes, get it there, Lewis.